Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Phil Hawthorne. Joining me as usual, I've got my partner in crime, Mr. Rohan Karamandi. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
And today we are joined by Dan from the USA. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Phil. Thanks. Good to be here.
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP Home projects. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certs, or any other YAML.
So, Dan, whereabouts in the States are you?
It's Connecticut. We're recently supposed to get hit by a hurricane, and thought I might not have power yet, but we got pretty much nothing, so.
Oh, wow.
I guess that's better than, having no power.
Yeah.
All right. So, I guess let's... Obviously, you reached out to us at feedback@haspodcast.io and said, hey, I love the show and want to come on and talk about a little bit of the stuff I've done. So I guess let's start off with, how you sort of got started with Home Assistant.
I've always been sort of interested in computers and electronics, and in 2012, I think, I started as a backer for SmartThings on Kickstarter.
Nice. Yep.
And even before that, I'd been interested in home automation, but was never quite sure what to buy. There didn't seem to be, quite as many bundled packages.
Yeah, it was very high-end stuff as well. Like if you wanted to get into anything home automation before, I think your only options were really stuff like X10, or you had to go into like the tens of thousands of dollars and a proper, like the rich people mansions would have, right?
Control 4 or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
About a year and a half ago, I switched over to Home Assistant, mainly because I had heard that SmartThings would eventually be retiring the Generation 1 hub that I had. And when I switched over, I loved Home Assistant. I told friends I didn't quite recommend it to people who weren't computer savvy or there's always technical issues. But, they've gotten a lot better in the past year and a half that I've been using it. So I may, even recommend it to the less technically savvy. I'm thinking of setting up my dad with it.
Nice.
Yeah, I like their UI isn't as dumbed down as the other consumer focused products, and I'm hoping that things will stay that way. I know the consumer focused products, they tend to, as time goes on, dumb down the UI and hide all the advanced features. One platform that I use that I wanted to talk about, I've never heard it mentioned here, is called MySensors. It's, I guess, kind of similar to ESP Home in that you create your own devices. And ESP Home, I've used it a little, easy to use, but this MySensors, it requires a bit more, really have to be a programmer to use it.
Right.
It will run on the Arduino. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah.
It's a little programmable innovative board. It will run on those, and you can program a lot more logic into the board itself than you can with ESP Home, I think. I also liked, I haven't actually done this, but if you want to create something that runs on battery power, the MySensors, they use RF chips for communication that are much more low powered than Wi-Fi or
interesting. Because that was going to be my next question. Because I've seen like MySensors is pretty popular. I've seen a lot of people recommending them on the community forums. But I've always thought maybe they're like do you remember, Rohan, like Happy Bubbles, those like little Bluetooth beacons? I just assumed MySensors and Happy Bubbles were the same thing. I'm guessing completely different by the sound of it. But like if ESP Home obviously has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Oh, sorry, ESP32 chips have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi in them, so you need to power them via some form of power pack similar to a Raspberry Pi. But if it's got an RF chip that can be connected and doesn't need to constantly page over Wi-Fi, there could be I guess you could run it just from a battery pack. That would be awesome.
So you can use I already had a whole bunch of these little called NRF something chips that you can connect to the Arduino and use them to communicate with each other. And before I used the MySensors, it was always really, really difficult to get the things to communicate over the RF. I basically had to get to all that low-level stuff myself, and the MySensors makes it super easy. The library handles all the communications, and don't really have to write any code for to handle the radio.
So in terms of if you've got like an RF device, so let's say you've got for example, a motion sensor that you want to connect through MySensors over RF. Do you have the code? You create little MySensors device on Arduino and have it push over RF. How do you then receive the motion sensor events into Home Assistant? Do you have like a MySensors Gateway that connects to RF, or do you need to get an RF radio yourself and sniff out the packets that are being sent across?
So you start with MySensors Gateway. You can connect it either via USB or Wi-Fi or MQTT. And so originally I created a MySensors Gateway on a Arduino that I connected via USB to my Raspberry Pi. So that was connected via USB and also had the RF chip to communicate with the all the other nodes. And when I upgraded my Raspberry Pi to use a SSD, I actually started having trouble. Like somehow the USB Arduino was interfering with the boot from the SSD. So at that point, I switched over to I used ESP 8266 and created a MySensors Gateway that connects via Wi-Fi.
Nice. Yep.
So one of my first Arduino projects way back when I was still using SmartThings. I had some LG outlets with little RF controller light switches. Like just using a proprietary RF. Those I had bought before I got any of the home automation stuff. And so once I started with SmartThings, I then basically took apart one of the remotes for those light switches and soldered some wires to it and hooked it up to our Arduino and was able to control it. And SmartThings had in the beginning they sold a thing called a Thing Shield.
Yes,
that you could basically bridge an Arduino to their hub.
Yeah.
And they discontinued it after quite a short time. I thought that was kind of disappointing, but I still had mine. It worked. So yeah, when I came to Home Assistant, I found found MySensors and switched it over to use that, and still.
So how did you
great.
know where to solder on that remote? Like, was it an RF remote that you were just able to get schematics for online and work out? Was there a tutorial that you had to follow, or?
No, bit of trial and error.
That's awesome.
I like it. That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, just I touched the wire here and saw the light turned on. So
yeah,
I still don't know if I'm doing things kind of wrong that might eventually fry it, but I'm surprised after 10 years it's still working. So
I think at least if we're still working after 10 years, then you've definitely got your money's worth out of it, right?
That's right.
So like on the show you were talking recently about the stand-up desks. I have one that's, I have a regular desk with a platform on it that just raises up and down. And when I got it, one of the first things I did to it was I created a little device using a servo motor and some 3D printed parts to just press the buttons to make it go up and down. And again hook that into MySensors. And I thought it was funny. You thought I was the only one. Why would I want a desk that I can control with my voice assistant or anything? But then I heard on the show you guys started talking. I was like, I guess other people do this too.
That's right. Well, if it can be done, why not? Right at that point.
I think I was reading somewhere either on Twitter recently or on Reddit. I can't remember. I do apologize to whoever originally put it out there, but I think they have like a special like way of working. Like they want to do work spans in like 25 minutes. Like there's a name for this like type of working, right? Where you just go hard for 25 minutes and then maybe take a break for 10 minutes or something. But this would be a great use case for like a desk, right? Like if you need to focus for 25, like you could, for people that, spend every day at their desk, you could have your desk automated in that, before lunch, you have to be standing up. Then after lunch, it goes down automatically. Or, if you've been sitting down for however long, it says, all right, now you've got to stand up and actually raise the desk up for you. So I think, a SitStand Desk is awesome idea to automate with.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if you integrate it with like your, whatever video, like WebEx, Zoom, whatever, right? Like using whatever API. And it's like, okay, if you're on a call, you don't want the camera to look like you're like playing like, oh, look at me go down the escalator or whatever, right? So, it'd be actually pretty cool. That's something actually pretty interesting at that point. So
I actually liked the use case someone mentioned recently that when their robot vacuum comes in the room, they'd have the desk raise up to get wires out of the way.
Cords out the way. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great use case. So I guess, so you mentioned before that you're considering moving, like getting Home Assistant in your dad's house. Have you got any ideas in what you want to achieve by doing that?
So he recently started getting some. Basically, he got all the Ring security system equipment, and I started looking into if I could integrate that with Home Assistant, and he was telling me that, he was kind of didn't really want me to do that because he said the Ring security system is professionally monitored. I want to make sure we don't interfere with it. But he also he has basically some IR controlled air conditioning and heating units.
Oh yeah.
That he had mentioned he would like to be able to control remotely. And first I had bought him a Broadlink something device.
Yeah.
That is able to control. I didn't really like their interface.
Sure.
Using their software, I was somehow only able to get the temperature to show in Celsius, which, we don't use that much in the US.
True.
And so I was playing with Home Assistant and figured out how to do all those same things.
So did you just build out your own controller, or like how did you get to there, or like how did you get all that information out of it?
First, I found how to integrate the Broadlink with Home Assistant, and there was some third-party GitHub integration that could create a little climate controller for it. But then I created a little, using ESP Home, I created some sensors for it, like a temperature sensor, humidity sensor, and realized basically I'm giving him all this equipment and seeing what I can tie together. So I added a IR LED to the ESP Home, and found ESP Home actually had something that will can do what I need with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you use ESP Home and you use MySensors. You use like a bunch of the different things, right? Based on kind of what works best for that scenario.
Yeah.
How do you kind of gauge that, or is it just what code's available and what can I slap on here, or what? Like,
well, sometimes it's what's easiest, what I've found to work with, but but sometimes, like, at least for my own projects, I'll prefer the MySensors. I want to have a lot of the Arduinos already, and and I like to I'm a software developer. I like programming this stuff, and but like for my dad, I figured the ESP Home, just a simple Wi-Fi thing, would be good.
So do you have like any off-the-shelf home automation products, or do you or would you prefer, like, for example, like there is a product called Sensibo that you can use, and I think there's another one, Tato or Tato, however you want to pronounce it, that is just a Wi-Fi device designed to control like air conditioning units, for example. Would you do you have any devices that you've gone off the shelf with, or would you rather build it out in Arduino yourself, where you've got control to automate it with?
I do have a whole bunch of regular light switches and
right.
door lock and thermos a ZWave thermostat, and
nice.
I think one of the very first products I got when I got SmartThings was my smart door lock.
What brand did you get? Like the Yale, or there's a few now.
Schlage.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been good to me. Except when the other day when the batteries died and I was outside without the key.
Yeah,
that is always my fear, right?
Yeah, it's always great until you lock yourself out.
Yeah, I prior to getting that thing, I used to lock myself out of my apartment all the time.
Yeah.
And since I got that, I was so smug. I thought, I don't need to hide a key outside. I'll never lock myself out.
What can go wrong now? Yeah.
Does the door lock you have, because I know there's a few versions ZWave, some of it just, keypads only, but others also have like a key on the door as well. Do you have the key version as well? So if you weren't so smug and had a key in your wallet, would you have been able to open the door?
Yes. So
okay.
I've learned I need to copy the key and put one outside somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, I heard the newer ones also have contacts on the bottom. You can hold a 9-volt battery to them if it's dead.
That's kind of cool.
Unfortunately, mine does not.
Yeah. I've always thought, though, what is the point of having those contacts? Like, if you get home and it's, 3 o'clock in the morning, you get home and the door lock doesn't work anymore. You've got more chance of carrying a key with you than you do a 9-volt battery to get enough power to unlock your door. And you're not going down to the supermarket or anywhere to get a 9-volt battery at 3 a.m. You're probably just going to... Yeah. You're just going to knock the door down, right? I don't know. I've never, unless you're then hiding a 9-volt battery in your garden for some reason. I just think then you're better off just hiding a key, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of people, and I myself do this too. Is you find a trusted neighbor, and you're like, okay, here's a key, right?
Or here's my 9-volt battery. If I ever come at 3 a.m. in the morning for a 9-volt battery, you need to give it to me. Yeah, don't give me a cup of sugar, but give me the 9-volt battery.
I'm sure they'd love you when you're knocking on the door for a 9-volt battery, but
I guess you could keep a battery in your car, and then if someone steals your car or breaks into your car, they don't get a key to your house, which that would probably be the ideal place.
Yeah.
One thing I kind of wanted to ask you guys about was, so the for my light switches, I've always thought it was kind of important to still have a physical light switch. So you can, I have a few ZWave light switches that I've wired in, but that's a real pain to do yourself, or you get an electrician. That's expensive. I wanted to talk about the Shelly products. That's, I guess you still need to wire those in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So from my understanding, you definitely need to wire them in, similar to what you would do with like a ZWave a ZWave dimmer or a switch, right? You'd still have like your momentary switch at the front, but then behind it you have the actual smarts behind it.
So basically you still have your same existing switch, right? And
because I think, Rohan, we had a guest on recently that had Shelly, and they were saying that because they just have the same the toggle switches, right? But behind them are Shelly, so everything, it looks like a normal switch. But as soon as you've turned it off or on, Shelly in the background will know that, okay, it's been toggled. Do a state or send a notification that's been changed.
Exactly. So the paddle or the like the flick or whatever, the outside of the switch essentially is just used as exactly what you said, Phil, as a toggle. And essentially Shelly is like, okay, it's keeping state of that, and it's also keeping, obviously it's got the relay to keep it to, cut on and off the power as well.
Yep.
And at that point it kind of does what it has to do, whether it's on or off or blink or whatever.
So Shelly can toggle the actual light on and off, and the switch is just notifying Shelly.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
So that way, let's say you've got like a switch, right? And generally, I'm thinking of how American switches are. Like up is off and down is on. So in that case, if
other way, up is on,
other way.
Is off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I find that sometimes, I don't really pay much attention to that. Like sometimes they seem to be one way, sometimes the other. I don't know.
Yeah. I've literally been in before I bought this house. I was again quite a few years ago, and when I was looking at houses and stuff, there was one house which was two switches. I think it was the bathroom, two switches, one for the fan and one for the lights, and the lights was up is on and fan was down is on or something like that. And I was like, oh my god, okay, so this is clearly somebody that just a proper electrician would not do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah, I was just, oh my god, like it was annoying.
But yeah, so I guess, if in that situation, like if you've got a switch and you go into Home Assistant and you tell Home Assistant to change the state of whatever light is connected to that Shelly, the switch, of course, obviously on the wall won't move. But then when you go up to the wall and you toggle the switch to the opposite direction, Shelly will then know, okay, the switch has been moved and the light is on, so now turn it off. I guess, it makes it a bit better for people that don't care about Home Assistant or any smart home. They just, if they flick a switch, they expect something to happen. So I guess that's where it comes in handy.
Yeah, but again, the general guidance is still like if you want to switch out this entire switch itself, right? And do that. If you're not comfortable with doing that, or you'd want to call an electrician to do that, I mean, realistically, you probably should call one to do the Shelly too, right? Because you're still working with the power.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the only.
And just if you're outside, I don't know, like you crazy North Americans, right? I guess you're only like 120 volts or something. But if you're in Australia, you do need an electrician. You must, it is law that you have to get an electrician to do it. I don't know what you crazy people in North America think you're doing, but. Yeah, definitely get professional in all the time. Especially
what's the slang that you guys call them? Sparkers?
Sparkies?
No. Sparkies.
Sparkies. Get a Sparky in to do your switches, right?
Yeah, and I think generally it is pretty similar here. I think it's also like you take somewhat of a risk, right? If something happens, whatever, your house burns down, and the insurance is like, can I see the electrician that did this? And you're like, well, I kind of did it myself. They're going to tell you to go pound sand when you ask for how much ever your house costs, right? So there's some level of risk there too, I think, and it depends on jurisdiction too, right? I guess it depends on region or county or whatever where you're based.
What was making you think of the Shellys, Dan? Like, I know you mentioned you got a ZWave door lock. Like, wouldn't you try and stick with the ZWave ecosystem?
Well, yeah, I do, that's also one of the reasons I prefer the MySensors, over ESP Home. I do kind of like to stay away from the Wi-Fi things, where I can, but I don't know, I do use some Wi-Fi equipment.
Yep.
I think the Wi-Fi might be more reliable than, ZWave I don't think I've had a problem with, but Zigbee, I have some Zigbee stuff too, and that occasionally drops. But
yeah, it's interesting. What are you using to power your Zigbee network? Is it still going through the SmartThings Hub, like as the controller?
At first, I did it first when I switched over to the Home Assistant. I was still using the SmartThings to control it, but I eventually bought Nortec.
Oh yeah,
nice.
USB, ZWave and Zigbee dongle.
Because I found, like, since moving over to Decons with my Zigbee network, it has been so much more reliable. Because I was always like giving so much shade to Zigbee. You can go back in early episodes of the podcast, right? Like, I was frustrated to the hell with my Zigbee network. I thought I was running those CC2531 chips with Zigbee to MQTT.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
that's
I
the one you
couldn't
have to
get
sniff and whatever, right?
Yeah, or
it's the worst.
like for whatever reason, like Philips Hue and Xiaomi devices just wouldn't act as repeaters for each other, and I have 20 odd Lightify Osram Zigbee lights that wouldn't act as repeaters. But since moving over to Decons, everything has just been a super Zigbee network. Granted, I do have a couple of Zigbee lights that randomly go unavailable or need to be repaired. Like, I've got an IKEA light bulb out in the garage that is no longer connected. But other than that,
bizarre.
it's very strange. But other than that, Zigbee's been pretty rock solid, which I've been quite impressed with.
Yeah.
I think I finally got most of my stuff stable and not dropping. Added a few, just a few outlets that I don't even need, but just act as repeaters.
Yeah.
Yep. And are you using any voice assistants, or have you got any tablets around the home to do any interfacing with Home Assistant?
Yeah, I do use the Amazon one all the time.
Yeah.
And
so how do you primarily interact with Home Assistant then? So do you use a tablet, or is a tablet just like because I know we were talking about this in the last episode we recorded, where again Phil has his tablet for a MQTT alarm panel, right? what do you use a tablet for, and is that primarily how you drive your Home Assistant installation, or do you use voice primarily, or
Yeah, so I do use mainly my Amazon device. Voice assistant.
Yeah. Appreciate you not saying the name.
I rarely go into the UI itself. Usually it's only if I'm away from home or something that I'll go into the UI to. I also have the I guess it's just a HomeKit integration right in the Home Assistant. And so I use that to interact with it through Siri on my phone.
Nice.
Obviously, I have an iPhone.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm away from home, that seems to have trouble communicating, so I'll go into the UI and control things that way.
Interesting. Yeah.
But another thing I was looking at was MQTT. I've been kind of interested in, seeing what I can do with that, but I'm wondering, what will MQTT do for me that I can't do?
MQTT is great for bridging systems together that don't natively talk to each other. So, Home Assistant has MQTT Discovery, which is a standard that Home Assistant has for itself, where other third-party systems can then create entities in Home Assistant on the fly. But it's also good for, just as an example, I have a Rainforest Eagle, which gets the current power usage from my meter for electricity. And it then connects, so that gets the electricity that I'm currently using for the whole house, and then publishes that to an MQTT topic, just as a current, like a sensor value. And then I have a sensor in Home Assistant that knows to read that MQTT topic to get the value out. And so now I can get, my whole house energy usage in Home Assistant as a sensor, which then goes into the energy dashboard, and I can then push that over into InfluxDB from Home Assistant.
Yeah, I like to think of it as, that one place where everybody says, hey, here's my state, or you say, hey, go become this state, right? One of those two. Yep. And based on that, it's one single place that, all of these, let's say, thousands of devices can talk to, and you can pull everything from that one place, right? And the nice thing with MQTT is because it's separate from Home Assistant and things like that. Again, even though it might be, you might be using like Home Assistant OS or whatever. Regardless, it's still technically separate from Home Assistant. It holds state there too, right? So, when Home Assistant boots up, it goes, okay, great. Well, what is this switch? And it just looks at MQTT and it says, okay, it's on, right? Whatever. Or what was the last known temperature of whatever else? Oh, 26. Great. Right. So that's the other nice thing too. But I gotta say, Dan, I do appreciate you asking that question, because I think we've talked about MQTT maybe 7,000 times on this show, but we've never actually explained it. So that is, I actually really do appreciate you asking that.
The first few times I had heard about it, which may have been here, I was always like, what is this MQTT?
It's funny how many of those things, like, it's, again, even Phil just mentioned Rainforest Eagle. As he said that, I'm like, Rainforest Eagle, why does that sound familiar? And like Googling it and like looking at what it is and whatever, right? But this is genuinely why I think why Phil and I do the show too, because it's like, we don't know half these things. So it's like, it's a good way for people to tell us what things people are looking at and so on. So
the good thing about MQTT as well is that there's so many like random devices that, because it's, a standard, that random devices will just connect to, right? So I think I have a Dyson smart fan and heater combo, and there is a custom component in Home Assistant, which I believe you can use local connection to the Dyson, because it basically connects to the Dyson. They run their own MQTT or something. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that's how I've read it. So there's a lot of like random things that could just connect to an MQTT broker that you define, and then you can then suck out that information. There's heaps of software out there to view what's going on an MQTT server. You can just create a sensor value from it in Home Assistant, and away you go. The good thing about MQTT as well is that it's very, very lightweight, and so it's it's made for Internet of Things devices, right? Very smart, very snappy, right? So because it's basically text, the payloads that are going across are very small, and because of that, it's great for if you send an on command over MQTT, the receiving device is going to get it very quickly. So it becomes fantastic for all those smart home devices that need instant status updates.
It scales crazy, like a lot too.
So I'm guessing, basically, if there's not a native integration in Home Assistant for your product, then chances are you can use MQTT for it.
Maybe if they expose MQTT, or allow you or allow their device to connect to your MQTT server or broker, I should say, in this, to use the correct terminology. But there are ways. So, for example, I've created HA Documon, which I currently work like in my dev branch, which I apologize, I haven't updated for quite some time. I have the ability for Docker containers to be exposed to Home Assistant as switch entities, and that's all powered by MQTT. So you could have servers running around the home with Docker containers running on them, and the little script that I've written will then publish a state to MQTT, which will then get fed into Home Assistant to say, this Docker container is up or down, or running this image. If you have the ability to access an API, for example, if you can find an API for an air conditioner that might not be integrated with Home Assistant, but you don't want to do a complete integration for Home Assistant, maybe you're like me, you don't know Python, you don't want to go down the whole writing a custom component, you could create your own little script in whatever language you prefer. Mine would be Node.js. Write a little script, interface with the air conditioners API, and publish that into topics into MQTT, and then you can bring that into Home Assistant with the MQTT climate device, for example. So yeah, many use, like if you're like, I know you're a software developer yourself, so I think that would be probably the best use case, like for you to be, if you can access APIs, bridge them, and pull them in as Home Assistant entities through MQTT.
Yeah. So a lot of times you'd need that third-party script or something that you build yourself that that lets you take whatever and then dump that in a standardized way into MQTT, right? Some of the other more interesting things is like I've got security cameras that do, again, object detection and things like that. So it does like a people count and things like that, and they actually natively dump into MQTT. So to say like, okay, great. So now I can actually take that and overlay that information where, from a Home Assistant perspective, that might mean that, okay, this is just a numeric counter, right? To say, okay, I have 3 people that it sees, right? Or whatever.
So then you would have like a sensor that says people count in living room 3.
Correct. Exactly. Yep. Based on what the camera sees and so on, right? And then it does the same with like Lux and all that stuff. So, but all of this stuff is coming from a camera, right? So how do I natively pull a lot of that stuff in? So because they deliver that mechanism via MQTT, I can just say, okay, Home Assistant, look at this value, and that is how bright the room is. Look at this other value, and that's how many people are in this room, right? So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And before I really knew too much about MQTT, one of my main questions was always I didn't understand, was it over Wi-Fi, which I guess now I know that's pretty much what it would run over Wi-Fi, right? So
yeah, so
definitely. It's just an app.
So MQTT definitely requires like some form of connection over LAN. Basically, you can have an MQTT broker running up in the cloud if you want to, and you can bridge devices. You could have car GPS trackers, I think, might publish to an MQTT broker up in the cloud, and then you can have Home Assistant connect to that and pull in your car's location, for example. Or you can just have it running locally. But yeah, the upshot of it is, because it's IP-based, you would need the device or some bridge to the device to be connected to the internet or to your local network to be able to connect to that broker.
Yeah. Thanks.
And so, Dan, so I guess, we mentioned before that, you're going to move Home Assistant up into your dad's house and go that way. What about your own home? Like, how many people have you got running? How many people you got at home at the moment? And do you have to account for anyone else in your home with using Home Assistant?
Well, it's just me in my home, so which can be kind of convenient when when things go down when they aren't working. There's no one to complain. So.
Yeah, it's definitely take those those blessings if you want. When one thing doesn't work, you say, "Hey, turn on this light," and it's like you just get yelled at. But
and and when something doesn't work, rather than go over and flip the switch manually, I have to come in here and, spend an hour trying to figure out why it's not working.
That's right. That's right.
That is.
Why bother trying to fix it, or why bother trying to just go up to it and flick a switch when you can spend several hours trying to troubleshoot something, right? But
and so, what are you using for presence detection, or do you even bother with presence detection, or just use the Home Assistant app as
just using the Home Assistant app on my iPhone. I have, I'm sure everyone probably has had some few false, I'll be sitting at home and suddenly all the lights will turn off because Home Assistant thinks I'm not home. So I set up like a virtual person entity in Home Assistant. I forgot exactly how I did that, but I also have a sensor pinging my iPhone.
Right.
That's not too reliable because a lot of times the iPhone goes to sleep.
Yeah.
But that combined with GPS, I forgot exactly how I made it more reliable, but somehow it is.
Sounds like you could use like a Bayesian sensor as well, like probability. If you're within 5 kilometers of home, and your phone was last connected to the network, within 30 minutes, and you're probably home, right? But then if you go outside of that radius and your phone hasn't been connected for a while, you're not home.
Yeah,
I guess that's one way to improve it.
Phil loves his Bayesian sensor, by the way. Talks about this all the time.
I really like I find them very confusing to set up. But I do like the probability of things. I'd have to check my config to see what what Bayesian sensor I've got set up at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I have one. Oh yeah, and that's my so I have a Bayesian sensor set up for the home to consider if someone is inside. So I don't care if someone's home, but if any of the motion sensors have detected motion, or if their TV is on, if the guest mode is activated, these all add into probabilities to say that, if something, depending on how many things are open, true, then, the home will know that someone is inside.
Right.
And then, of course, if, 2 motion sensors get activated and the alarm panel is activated, or armed, I should say, then I'll get an alert. But if, one of the motion sensors is just bugging out because a car's driven past and a shadow's come across the wall, I don't want to necessarily get an alert to say that someone's broken in if one motion sensor's detected something.
Yeah, that's, I might look into that. What is that?
So the Bayesian sensor, it's like a platform that's native to Home Assistant. And it basically takes a group of sensors. So you define the sensors. So for example, if I was to give it 2 motion sensors or 3 motion sensors, I could say that if, the 2 motion sensors at the front of the house, if they're both marked as seeing motion, I might give them a weight of, 60% or 0.6 probability that, someone is in the house. And then for the whole sensor, you have like a threshold. And if the threshold goes above, 85% or something, then the Bayesian sensor goes from false to true. And then that someone is there. Like there's a whole, I can't explain it verbally, but there is a whole lot of documentation that can do it better. It is the Bayesian sensor. We'll leave links in the show notes, obviously. But yeah, it's been in Home Assistant for quite some time. And I think it's a really powerful sensor. Like obviously I've just done an example of using motion sensors, but I know people have, I think even in the Home Assistant docs, there's been some great examples of just random things that people can ascertain, if something is working or not. Yeah. I think someone's done like washing machine, detecting if it's running or not based on power levels, and, door states and a whole bunch of stuff. So
yeah. Definitely look into that. I was gonna ask you how to spell that, but if it's in your show notes, I'll pull it from there.
Just in case people are listening, it's Bayesian.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time today to talk to us. Really appreciate it. Like, I'm definitely going to have to look into these MySensor things, and maybe I'm going to have to buy a soldering iron, I think.
Ooh.
Just
okay.
start randomly soldering things, right? And hope for, like, I strike gold like Dan did.
Like that. I'm terrible at soldering, but whenever I have to solder, I'm, deathly afraid I'm gonna short something, but
blow something up. Yeah,
that's why I've refused to buy one so far.
And usually I do end up shorting something and then spend hours extra trying to unsolder it.
Yeah.
This is why I buy pre-made things, right?
That's right.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We really do appreciate it. Speak soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.